On the planet Ixis, Kalen stood on the observation deck, watching the distant stars shimmer like tiny diamonds in the black sky. The planet was a place of great beauty, with its wide, lush forests and towering mountains. But to Kalen, everything seemed far too rigid, far too controlled. He was an Iximian, one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. His people valued strength, power, and logic above all else. The idea of weakness, of anything that didn't follow the strict rules of their society, was unheard of. But something inside Kalen told him that there had to be more to life than the cold, calculated path his people walked. It was that feeling that had led him to a decision no one in his family, his friends, or even his entire planet would ever have agreed with. He had decided to meet a human. Humans were considered the most fragile species in the galaxy. They were small, weak, and lacked the advanced technologies that Iximian society had long mastered. Most Iximians saw them as little more than curiosities, beneath them, not worthy of their attention. Yet there was something about humans that intrigued Kalen. They had been visiting the planet for a few years, bringing their technology, exploring, but they were always treated as guests, never as equals. It was during one of these human expeditions that Kalen first saw her. Layla was her name. She had dark hair that shimmered like the night sky, eyes filled with warmth and curiosity, something so different from the cold, calculating expressions Kalen was used to. When their eyes met, something strange happened. For the first time in his life, Kalen felt uncertain, as though there was more to discover beyond the walls of his perfect world. The meeting had been accidental. Kalen had been observing the human settlement from a distance when he saw her, standing near a group of her people, talking and laughing. She was different from the rest, not because of her appearance, but because of the way she carried herself. She seemed at peace, despite the coldness of the planet. He couldn't explain it, but something in her made him want to know more. Against all the teachings of his people, Kalen approached her. It wasn't easy. His people believed in staying apart from the humans, even to the point of avoiding direct contact. But Kalen was determined. He had to know what made her so different. When he finally stood in front of her, she looked up, startled at first. But there was no fear in her eyes, only curiosity. "Hello," Kalen said, his voice steady but unsure. He hadn't planned on speaking. The words just came out. "Hi," Layla replied, smiling gently. Her accent was thick, and Kalen had trouble understanding her at first. But the warmth in her voice made him want to listen more. "I'm Kalen," he said. "You're human, right?" Layla laughed softly. "That's right. I'm Layla." They spoke for a while, just small talk at first. But as the minutes passed, Kalen found himself growing more and more interested in what she had to say. Layla didn't look at him with the awe that most humans did when they met an Iximian. She didn't treat him as some kind of superior being. She treated him as an equal. And that was something Kalen had never experienced before. As the conversation went on, Layla told him about her life back on Earth, the struggles of her people, the wars they had fought, and the dreams they had for the future. Kalen listened intently, fascinated by her words. She spoke of kindness, compassion, and the simple joy of being alive. These were ideas that Kalen had never thought about before. In his world, life was about achievement, power, and maintaining order. Emotions were often seen as weaknesses, but Layla spoke as though emotions were strength, strength to be embraced, not hidden. Kalen found himself wanting to know more, to understand her world, to understand her. But as the conversation came to an end, he knew he had to leave. His people would never accept this kind of interaction. If they found out he had spoken to a human like this, it could bring trouble. But deep inside, Kalen couldn't shake the feeling that something important had happened. He had connected with Layla in a way he couldn't explain. It was more than just curiosity. It was a bond, a connection that went beyond the limits of their worlds. The next day, Kalen couldn't stop thinking about her. He tried to focus on his work, on his duties, but his mind kept drifting back to the moment when he had looked into Layla's eyes. The warmth, the gentleness. It was unlike anything he had ever known. And for the first time in his life, Kalen felt a sense of longing. A longing to understand something greater than the life he had known. But Kalen knew that meeting Lila was dangerous. It wasn't just the rules of his people that made it forbidden. The entire Iximian society believed that humans were inferior, weak. They saw no reason to treat them as equals. They had their own problems, their own issues to solve. The last thing anyone wanted was for one of their own to start sympathizing with the humans. Kalen couldn't explain why he felt drawn to her. All he knew was that when he looked at Layla, he saw something that wasn't weakness. He saw strength. And that, more than anything, made him want to learn more about her, about the human race. He couldn't explain it, but Kalen knew one thing for certain. Meeting Lila had changed him. And deep down, he knew it was just the beginning of something that would change everything. Kalen couldn't stop thinking about Lila. Every time he closed his eyes, her face appeared in his mind. Her laughter, her voice, and the way she had looked at him with kindness and curiosity. He had never experienced anything like it before. But with each passing day, the weight of his growing feelings pressed harder on him. He had always been taught that his kind was superior. The Iximian race was the most advanced in the galaxy, and the humans were nothing more than a curious species, weak, fragile, and in need of guidance. But the more Kalen spent time with Lila, the more those beliefs started to feel wrong. Despite his doubts, Kalen knew he had to be careful. He had already broken the unspoken rules by speaking with a human. If anyone found out about his growing bond with Lila, it could bring trouble, not just for him, but for her as well. Iximian society was not a place for such relationships. They would never accept it. The leaders of Ixis, the council, would view it as a betrayal, and it would certainly endanger both of them. But no matter how hard he tried, Kalen could not ignore the feelings inside him. He knew he had to see Layla again. So in the dead of night, when the rest of Ixis was asleep, Kalen slipped away from his home and headed toward the human settlement. When he arrived, he saw her standing near a small gathering of humans. They were laughing and talking, but when Layla caught sight of him, she excused herself and walked over, her face lighting up with a smile. Kalen's heart skipped a beat, as it always did when he saw her. "You came," Layla said softly, her voice full of warmth. "I couldn't stay away," Kalen replied, his voice low but steady. "I needed to see you." Layla looked around to make sure no one was paying attention, then pulled Kalen to a quiet corner of the settlement. They had learned by now to be cautious, not because of their own discomfort, but because of the danger it posed. If anyone saw them together too often, questions would be raised. "I've been thinking about what you said," Kalen began, "about humans being emotional. I never understood it. Emotions seemed like a weakness to me. They cloud your judgment, make you act in ways that don't make sense." Layla smiled. "I told you, emotions are part of who we are. They can be messy, but they also make us strong. I know you don't understand it yet, but that's okay. Maybe one day you will." Kalen nodded slowly, his mind racing. She was right. The more time he spent with her, the more he realized that there was a lot he didn't understand about her world. But he was beginning to see that maybe their differences were not as important as he had once thought. Maybe the way they lived didn't need to be the same for them to understand each other. Layla looked at him seriously. "Kalen, I know it's not easy for you. I know the pressure you're under to stay away from humans. Your people don't understand us. But that doesn't change the truth. What we're building here, our friendship, it's something that's worth fighting for." Kalen's chest tightened. She was right. It wasn't just about them being friends. It was about something bigger. There was a growing tension on Ixis. The council had already started talking about the humans, questioning their role on the planet, and even considering sending them away. It was all based on the fear of the unknown, the fear of what might happen if humans were allowed to stay for too long. Kalen had overheard conversations about it in the halls of the council building. There were murmurs about sending the humans back to their home planet, Earth. and ending their research mission on Ixis. Some of the council members were even calling for more drastic measures. Kalen couldn't believe it. The humans had been nothing but respectful, and yet they were treated as if they didn't belong. "Layla, I think something is happening on Ixis," Kalen said quietly. "The council has been talking about sending the humans away. I've heard them whispering about it." Layla's eyes widened. "What? But why?" Kalen shook his head. "They're afraid. They don't understand you or your people. They think your presence here is a threat to our way of life." Layla frowned, frustration building in her. "That's just like them. They fear what they don't understand. But they're wrong, Kalen. We're not a threat. We're just here to learn, to explore, to build something better. I wish they could see that." Kalen looked down, conflicted. His loyalty to his people had always been strong. But as he stood there, with Layla's hand gently resting on his arm, he realized that something inside him had changed. He couldn't stand by and watch this happen. He couldn't allow his people to make the same mistakes they had made in the past, treating others as inferior, as less than. That was the way of the old Iximian leaders, not the way of progress. "I can't let them do this," Kalen said, his voice determined. "I won't stand by while they destroy everything that we've worked for. I don't care if it's against the rules. I'm going to do something about this." Layla's face softened with understanding. "I knew you would. You're not like them, Kalen. You're better than that." Kalen took a deep breath. He knew the road ahead would be dangerous, but for the first time in his life, he didn't care about the risks. He cared about what was right, and what was right was that he and Layla, and all humans, deserved a chance to live together, to learn from each other, to build a future where the differences between their species didn't divide them, but brought them closer together. "I won't let them take you away," Kalen said firmly. "I'll find a way to stop it." Layla smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Kalen. I know this isn't easy, but you're not alone in this." As they stood there, together in the quiet night, Kalen felt a sense of purpose growing inside him. The fight ahead would be hard, but he wasn't afraid anymore. He had a reason to fight, and that reason was standing right next to him. Days passed, but Kalen could not stop thinking about Layla. Her voice, her smile, the way she spoke with such honesty, it all stayed with him. He had never felt this way before, and it troubled him. Kalen was an Iximian, a member of one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. His people valued strength, logic, and order above all else. Emotions, especially those of affection and attachment, were seen as weaknesses. The idea that he, an Iximian, could form a bond with a human, a species that his people viewed as inferior, was dangerous. But despite the warnings in his mind, Kalen could not shake the feeling that he had to see Layla again. One evening, when the twin moons of Ixis hung low in the sky, Kalen returned to the place where he had met her. It was a quiet spot near the human settlement, a place where he could watch the stars and gather his thoughts. To his surprise, Layla was there, standing alone by a small campfire, looking up at the sky with a thoughtful expression. Kalen hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. He had been so careful up until now. He had followed the rules, kept his distance from the humans, and never allowed anyone to see the growing curiosity inside him. But something about this moment, standing there in the soft glow of the fire, made him want to speak to her again. So he walked forward slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. Layla looked up when she heard his footsteps. Her eyes widened slightly, but then she smiled, a gentle smile that made Kalen's heart race. "You came back," she said, her voice warm and welcoming. "I didn't expect to," Kalen replied, his voice low. "But I couldn't stay away." Layla gestured for him to sit beside her, and after a brief hesitation, Kalen sat down. They were both quiet for a while, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the distant hum of the planet's wildlife. Kalen tried to find the words to explain what he was feeling, but they didn't come easily. He had been trained to speak logically, to always have an answer, but with Lila, everything felt different. He didn't have an answer for why he was drawn to her, why he couldn't stop thinking about her. Finally, it was Layla who broke the silence. "I've been thinking about what you said last time," she said softly, "about how different our worlds are." Kellen turned to face her. "Yes, our worlds are very different. The way we see everything, the way we live. It's hard to understand." Layla nodded. "It's not just the way we live, though. It's the way we think, the way we feel. Humans are emotional. We act on our feelings, even when it doesn't make sense, and sometimes that leads to mistakes." She paused, as if considering her next words carefully. "But it also leads to moments of kindness, of connection. Even when we don't have the answers, we still try." Kellen was silent for a long moment, reflecting on her words. He had always believed that logic and reason were the only things that mattered. Emotions to him were just distractions, yet here was Layla, speaking of something he had never even considered. Could it be that humans saw the world in a completely different way, one that didn't rely on control or power? I don't understand," Kalen said honestly. "How can you live like that, with so much uncertainty, with so much emotion? It seems dangerous." Layla smiled gently. "Maybe. But it's also what makes us human. We don't always know what will happen, but we do our best. We make mistakes, but we also learn from them." She looked up at the stars. "Maybe that's what makes us strong. Not our power, not our control, but our ability to feel, to care." Kellen watched her, his mind spinning. He had never thought of things this way. In his world, emotions were something to be controlled, something that made people weak. But here, with Lila, emotions seemed to be the very thing that made her strong. He had always been told that humans were inferior, that they could never be equals to an Ixinian. But as he sat there, talking with Lila, he began to wonder if his people had it wrong. "I wish I could see things like you do," Kalen said quietly. Layla turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe you can. Maybe we all can, if we just let ourselves see the world differently. It's not easy, but it's worth it." The conversation drifted to other topics as the night wore on. They talked about their homes, their families, their dreams. Kalen found himself sharing more than he ever thought he would, speaking of things he had never told anyone, not even his closest friends. Layla listened with patience and understanding, never judging, always accepting him for who he was. As the fire burned down to embers, Kalen realized that something had changed inside him. He had always believed that his people were the strongest, the smartest, the most capable. But now, sitting beside Lila, he wasn't so sure. She had shown him a different kind of strength, one that wasn't about power or control, but about understanding, about connection. When it was time to leave, Kalen stood up, feeling the weight of the moment. "I should go," he said, his voice heavy with something he couldn't name. Lila nodded, but before he could walk away, she reached out and placed a hand on his arm. "I'm glad you came back," she said quietly. Kalen looked down at her hand, then up into her eyes. "Me too." As he turned and walked away, his heart was torn. He knew that what he was doing was dangerous. If anyone found out about his friendship with Lila, it could ruin him. The Iximian Council would never accept it. But no matter the consequences, Kalen knew one thing: he couldn't stay away from her. And somehow, he knew that the bond between them was only just beginning. The next few days were tense. Kalen couldn't stop thinking about what he had promised Lila. The Council's whispers about sending the humans away had only grown louder. The fear in their voices, the fear of the unknown, was stronger than ever. But Kalen knew that something had to be done. He couldn't let them continue down this path, not when he had seen how much the humans had to offer, how much they could teach Ixis. His thoughts constantly drifted to Lila. Each time he met with her, something inside him felt more certain. He had never thought of emotions as a source of strength. But now, he saw things differently. Layla had opened his eyes to a truth he had never considered before. Strength was not about power. It was about connection, understanding, and the willingness to change. Late one evening, after a long day of attending council meetings, Kalen stood at the edge of the city overlooking the distant human settlement. His mind was racing with ideas, plans, and strategies. He knew he had to act, but he also knew it wouldn't be easy. He was going to have to make the hardest decision of his life, one that would change everything. That night, as the stars glittered above, Kalen met Layla once again, in their secret spot by the fire. The air was cool, and the soft breeze carried the scent of the night flowers. Layla was already waiting for him, her eyes scanning the stars, lost in thought. "You're here," she said softly, looking up as he approached. "I couldn't stay away," Kalen replied, his voice filled with a mix of determination and worry. "I've been thinking a lot about what we discussed. The council is getting more serious about sending the humans back. I don't think they'll stop until they've made their decision." Layla's face grew serious. "Then we need to act fast. If we don't do something now, we might not get another chance." Kellen nodded. "I know, but I'm not sure what to do. The council won't listen to me. They see us as different. They don't understand that we're not so different after all. I can't just tell them to change their minds. It's not that simple." Layla sat down on a nearby rock and patted the spot beside her. Kellen hesitated for a moment before sitting down. He could feel the weight of the moment. The world around them seemed still, but inside him, everything was moving too fast. He didn't have the answers, but he knew that he couldn't give up. "We have to find a way to show them," Layla said, her voice quiet but firm. "We can't change their minds with words alone. But maybe, if they saw what we've built together, if they saw how much we've learned from each other, they'd understand. Maybe they'll realize that we're not enemies, that we're allies." Kellen thought about it. Could it be that simple? Could showing the council how much had changed between the humans and Eximian society be enough to make them reconsider their decision? He wasn't sure, but it was the only plan they had. "We'll need help," Kalen said. "The humans will have to stand with us, and I'll need allies on the council, those who still believe in something better. But it's risky. If we fail, the consequences could be severe, for both of us." Layla reached out and placed a hand on his arm. "We can't be afraid of failure, Kellen. If we don't try, we're already failing. We have to take this chance, not just for us, but for everyone, for our future." Kalen met her gaze, and for a moment, everything felt clear. This wasn't just about his feelings for her anymore. This was about something bigger, about changing the course of his people's future, about showing them that their way was not the only way. "You're right," Kalen said softly. "We have to do this. We can't just sit by and wait for things to happen. We have to make them happen." The next few days were filled with planning. Kalen secretly met with a few members of the council who still believed in progress and peace. It wasn't easy. Many of them were afraid of change, afraid of what it would mean for Eximian society. But Kalen spoke passionately, explaining how much he had learned from his time with the humans, and how much they could offer. Slowly, he started to gain their trust. At the same time, Layla worked with the humans. She spoke to the leaders of the human delegation, telling them what was happening, what was at stake. They were hesitant at first, unsure of what kind of risk they would be taking. But Layla's words, full of conviction, pushed them to act. The humans agreed to join the effort, ready to show the Eximian Council the strength of their bond with Kalen and his people. Finally, the day came when Kalen and Layla stood together, facing the council. The air was thick with tension as the members of the council gathered in the great hall, their eyes filled with doubt and suspicion. Kalen stood at the front of the room, Layla by his side, her hand resting gently on his arm. The room fell silent as the council members waited for him to speak. Kalen took a deep breath. He had never felt so nervous in his life, but he knew he had to do this. For Layla, for the humans, for the future of both their worlds. Honorable members of the council, Kellen began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. We are at a crossroads. For too long, we have seen the humans as nothing more than visitors, a species beneath us. But I have learned something that I cannot ignore. We are not so different. What makes us strong is not our power, not our technology, but our ability to connect, to learn from one another. The humans have shown me that. He paused, letting his words sink in. The council members exchanged glances, clearly uneasy, but Kalen pushed on. I stand before you today not as an Eximian, not as a member of our council, but as someone who believes in something greater. We must not turn our backs on the humans. We must embrace them as equals, as allies. Together, we can create a future that is stronger than anything we have known. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, a few of the council members began to nod, their faces filled with uncertainty, but also with the glimmer of understanding. Kellen turned to Lila. Her smile was small, but filled with hope. It was a step, just the beginning, but it was the first step in what could change everything. The days after the council meeting were filled with uncertainty. Kalen had spoken with passion, with truth, but would the council really change? The room had been silent after his words, and while some members seemed to understand, others remained skeptical. Change had never been easy, especially in Eximian society. But Kalen couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. A small part of him believed that something had shifted. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give him hope. Lila was just as nervous as he was. The humans had been waiting, watching for any sign of progress. They were trusting Kalen, but they didn't know what would happen next. The council was not known for its quick decisions, especially when it came to matters as big as this. The fate of the humans on Ixis hung in the balance. That night, Kalen returned to the human settlement, eager to speak with Lila. She was standing by the same fire they had met by so many times before, her silhouette illuminated by the soft glow of the flames. When she saw him, her face brightened, and she walked over quickly, her eyes full of questions. Well, she asked, her voice tense with anticipation. I spoke, Kalen said, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. I told them everything. I told them about us, about how much we've learned from each other. I don't know if it will be enough, but it's a start. Layla smiled, but there was still worry in her eyes. You did the right thing, Kalen. Now we wait. I know it's not easy, but we've done all we can for now. Kalen nodded, though doubt still lingered in his mind. What if it wasn't enough? What if the council decided to send the humans away anyway? The fear of what might happen was overwhelming, but he knew he couldn't dwell on that. He had already taken a risk, and now they had to wait and see what the council would decide. The following days were long and filled with tension. Kalen spent most of his time in the council chambers, meeting with the members who had shown some support, trying to convince the others. He was careful with his words, always mindful of the fact that not all of them were ready to accept the humans as equals. But as time passed, he began to see small changes. More members of the council were starting to listen. They were no longer dismissing his words so easily. One evening, Kalen was summoned to the council hall. His heart raced as he entered the great chamber, his thoughts consumed with worry. He had no idea what the decision would be, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something important was about to happen. The council chamber was filled with the hum of quiet voices. The members were seated at their large table, their faces serious. At the head of the table stood the council leader, a tall, imposing figure named Varys. His eyes were sharp, his expression unreadable. Kalen had always respected Varys, but he had never been sure if Varys would support the humans. He had always been a man of order, of strict tradition. Let us begin, Varys said, his voice deep and commanding. We have heard much from Kalen and others about the presence of the humans on Ixis. Now, we must decide what to do. Kalen stood quietly, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it, the moment of truth. Varys looked at Callan. Callan, you have made your case. You have spoken of the humans as if they are no different from us. You have asked for our trust, and we have listened. But now, the council must come to a decision. Callan's breath caught in his throat. He knew this wasn't going to be easy. The council had always prided itself on its logic, on making decisions that were based on reason and security. They would never make a decision based on emotions alone. We have debated, Varys continued, and we have considered the risks. There are many who believe that the humans' presence is a threat to our society, but there are others who believe, as you do, Callan, that there is something to be gained from this alliance. After much discussion, it is clear that the council is divided. Callan's stomach tightened. A divided council meant no clear answer, no resolution. It meant that the humans might still be sent away. He could feel his hands shake with nervousness. Varys raised his hand, signaling for silence. However, after much debate, we have reached a conclusion. We will not send the humans away. Instead, we will give them a chance to prove themselves. But there will be conditions. They must work with us, learn our ways, and contribute to the well-being of Ixis. In return, they will be allowed to stay. A wave of relief washed over Callan. He had done it. He had convinced the council to allow the humans to stay. But it wasn't over yet. The humans would have to prove themselves, just as Callan had hoped. It was the first step toward a new future, a future where both species could coexist. Layla had been waiting outside the council hall. When she saw Callan approach, her eyes filled with hope. She had heard the murmur of voices inside, but she hadn't known the decision yet. They said yes, Callan said, his voice barely above a whisper. The council agreed. The humans can stay. Layla's eyes sparkled with relief, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. The weight of the decision had been lifted, but there was still much work to be done. The future was uncertain, but for now, they had won a victory. The humans would stay on Ixis, and they had a chance to prove that they belonged. We did it, Layla said, her voice filled with emotion. We did, Callan replied, a smile forming on his face. It wasn't just a victory for the humans, but for both species. It was a step toward something better. As they stood there together, the stars overhead seemed to shine a little brighter. Callan knew the path ahead would be difficult. There would be more challenges, more risks, but this was only the beginning. And as long as they stood together, he believed they could face anything. The victory at the council was only the beginning. While Callan felt a sense of relief that the humans were allowed to stay on Ixis, he knew that this fragile peace wouldn't last unless they proved themselves. Both the Ixinian and human communities had to work together, and the pressure was now on to show the council that their decision was right. Callan spent the next few days speaking to both the humans and the Ixinian leaders, urging them to collaborate. It wasn't easy. There were many who still didn't trust the humans and were only grudgingly accepting the decision. But Callan was determined. The humans would have to show their value, and the Ixinian people would have to understand that strength lay not in division, but in unity. Layla, too, was working hard. She had spoken with the human delegation about the importance of demonstrating their worth. There was still resistance among the humans as well. Many of them were afraid, unsure of how to prove themselves in a world so different from their own. But Layla's words were full of hope and conviction. She encouraged them to share their knowledge, to offer their skills, and to embrace the opportunity to build something new. One evening, Callan met Layla by the fire again, the place where they had shared so many quiet moments. It had become their spot, a place where they could speak freely, away from the prying eyes of the council and the people. "How are things going?" Callan asked, sitting beside her. Layla looked tired, but her expression was one of quiet determination. "The humans are doing their best. Some of them are learning our ways, and others are helping with the work in the city. But there's still a lot of fear. I can see it in their eyes. They don't trust the Ixinians, and the Ixinian leaders don't trust them." Callan nodded. He knew that fear was the biggest obstacle. Fear of the unknown, fear of change, and fear of losing what they thought they knew. But the truth was, they all needed each other. He just hoped they would realize that before it was too late. "We'll keep pushing," Kalen said firmly. "We can't let fear control us. We have to show them what we can do together." The days that followed were filled with tension. Every step forward felt like 2 steps back. The humans were working hard, but there were those who still didn't believe in them. The Eximian leaders were watching, waiting for any sign of failure. It felt as though the smallest mistake could undo everything they had worked for. Then, one morning, the humans were called upon to help with an emergency. A large section of the city's infrastructure had collapsed overnight due to a powerful storm. Buildings were damaged, and several Eximian citizens were trapped under debris. The city was in chaos, and the council needed all hands on deck. Kalen watched as Layla and several other humans rushed to the site. It was a test, a true test of their ability to work together. If the humans could help in this crisis, it would show everyone that they were not a threat, but a valuable ally. But if they failed, the council's decision would be in jeopardy. Layla was at the forefront, directing the human teams to clear debris and help the injured. Kalen could see the fear in her eyes, but she didn't hesitate. She worked tirelessly, leading by example. Her calm and efficient demeanor inspired the others, both humans and Eximians alike. Kalen was right behind her, coordinating with the Eximian leaders to bring in supplies and support. He had never seen the Eximian people work so closely with the humans before. The walls that had divided them seemed to be slowly crumbling, replaced by a shared sense of urgency and purpose. For hours they worked together, lifting debris, rescuing the trapped citizens, and rebuilding what had been destroyed. It was hard work, exhausting, and filled with moments of fear and doubt. But Kalen could see something else happening. The Eximian people, who had once seen the humans as weak, were starting to recognize their strength. They were seeing firsthand the value the humans brought to the table. It wasn't just about technology or power. It was about compassion, resourcefulness, and determination. By the end of the day, the immediate crisis had been averted. The injured had been treated, and the damaged buildings were being repaired. But it wasn't just the physical work that had been accomplished. The mental walls that had separated the humans and Eximians were beginning to come down. Kalen found Layla once the work had settled down. She was sitting on a stone, covered in dust, her clothes torn and dirty. But her eyes were bright with satisfaction. They had done it. They had proven themselves. "We did it," she said, a tired but genuine smile on her face. Kalen sat down beside her, his heart still racing. "We did. But this is just the beginning. The council will see what we've done today. They'll have to." Layla nodded, her expression thoughtful. "We can't stop now. The work has only just begun. We've shown them we can be helpful, but we need to prove that we can be trusted." "We will," Kalen said confidently. "This is the start of something new. The council will see that." But just as Kalen spoke those words, a shadow loomed over them. A group of Eximian leaders approached, their faces hard, their eyes narrowed. It was Varys, the council leader, accompanied by a few others who had not been convinced by the humans' presence. "You've done well today," Varys said, his voice low but filled with authority. "But this is only one small act. It doesn't change everything." Kalen's stomach tightened. He had feared this moment. The council had seen the humans work, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. There was still distrust, still doubt. "We are not done yet," Varys continued, "but we will be watching. Prove that this was not a fluke. Prove that you and the humans can be trusted." Layla's smile faded slightly, but she stood tall, meeting Varys's gaze. "We will prove it," she said firmly. "We will keep working, keep showing you that we are worthy of your trust." As the Eximian leaders walked away, Kalen and Layla exchanged a look. They knew the road ahead would not be easy. The test had been passed, but there were many more hurdles to come. The Council's decision to give them a chance was just the beginning. They had to keep proving themselves, day after day. But for the first time, Kalen felt a sense of certainty. They were on the right path. Together, the humans and the Eximian people could change the future. It wouldn't be easy, but they were ready for the challenge. The sun had begun to set over the city, casting long shadows across the buildings and streets. The air was thick with the promise of change. For Kalen, this evening felt different. It was as if everything he had fought for, everything he had believed in, was finally coming into focus. The humans were proving themselves, slowly but surely. The Eximian people were starting to see the value in their presence, but there was still so much to be done. It had been weeks since the emergency, and while the city had recovered, the work was far from over. Kalen and Layla had spent every day working side by side, guiding their people toward the future they dreamed of. There were still skeptics, those who believed that the humans were a threat, those who feared that the alliance would weaken Eximian society. But more and more, the walls between the two groups were crumbling. That evening, as Kalen walked through the city, he saw the results of the hard work. Humans and Eximians were working together on every corner, rebuilding, learning from one another, and creating something new. The streets that had once been divided were now shared spaces, with both species working side by side. There was a harmony in the air that had never existed before, and Kalen felt it deep in his chest. Layla was waiting for him by the fire again, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the flames. She looked tired, but there was a quiet strength in her eyes. She had been working tirelessly to make the humans feel at home, helping them adapt to a new world. But Kalen knew she was also feeling the weight of the responsibility they both carried. The future of Ixis was uncertain, and their bond, this alliance, was still fragile. Another long day, Kalen said as he sat down beside her. His voice was tired, but filled with a sense of accomplishment. But it's happening, Layla. It's really happening. I can feel it. Layla smiled softly, though her eyes were full of concern. It's happening, but we still have a long way to go. We've made progress, but there are still those who don't trust us. We can't take that for granted. Kalen nodded. He understood. Trust was not something that could be built overnight. It was something that had to be earned, piece by piece. And though they had made great strides, there were still many who believed that the humans were a danger to Ixis. I know, Kalen said quietly, but I believe in this. I believe in what we're doing here. We're building something stronger than anything either of our peoples could have done alone. Together, we can create something that will last. Layla looked at him, her expression thoughtful. I hope you're right, but there are still moments when I wonder if it's enough, if we've really changed anything at all. Kalen reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. We've changed everything, one step at a time, and I'll keep taking those steps with you. We both will. The moment felt peaceful, but Kalen knew the real work was just beginning. The next few days would be critical. The council had agreed to give the humans a chance, but they would be watching closely. Any mistake, any failure, could send everything crashing down. The following morning, Kalen was called to the council hall again. This time, the air was heavier. There were no cheers, no celebrations. The council members were seated in their usual positions, their faces serious and stern. Varys, the leader, was sitting at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Kalen took his place, his heart pounding in his chest. Sit down, Kalen, Varys said, his voice firm. We have a matter to discuss. Kalen sat, his nerves on edge. What could this be about? Had the humans done something wrong? Had the progress they had made been undone? We've seen the progress you've made, Varys continued, his tone still serious. The collaboration between the humans and Eximian people has been unexpected. But we must be clear about one thing. You've earned a chance, not a guarantee. There are still risks, still questions. Kalen's stomach tightened. What are you saying, Varys? The council leader looked at him, his gaze steady. What we are saying is this. You have proven that the humans can contribute. You've shown us that they are capable of working with us. But we need more. We need to see that this alliance is not just a temporary partnership, but a lasting one. And that means real commitment from both sides. Kalen nodded, his mind racing. What do you need from us? You and the humans must prove that you are willing to make this alliance permanent, Varys said. There must be no more doubt. We need to see actions, not just words. We are prepared to offer the humans full citizenship on Ixis, but only if they can show that they will respect our ways and contribute to the betterment of our society. Kalen felt a wave of relief wash over him. Full citizenship for the humans was a huge step forward. It meant they were no longer visitors, no longer guests. They were part of Ixis. But he also knew it would take time to show the council that the humans truly belonged. We'll do everything we can, Kalen said firmly. I promise you that. Varys studied him for a moment before nodding. I hope so. But remember, this is a test. There will be no second chances. With that, the council meeting ended. Kalen walked out of the hall, his mind heavy with the weight of the decision. The humans had been given a chance, but now they had to prove themselves once again. Later that night, Kalen met with Lila, telling her what had happened. She listened quietly, her face thoughtful. It's a big step, she said finally. But we're ready. We'll show them. Kalen smiled. We will. Together. And so, the work continued. The humans and Iximian people worked side by side, proving that their alliance was not just a fleeting moment, but a future worth fighting for. There were still challenges ahead, still moments of doubt. But every day, they took another step toward a new world, one where both species could thrive, side by side, as equals. Kalen knew the road would never be easy, but he also knew it was worth it. They had come so far. And now, there was no turning back.